So, how did protectionism deteriorate the idea of collective security that led to the decade of the 1930s and countries operating in their own self interest again? Let's get into it right here. So, in my last video, I talked about the decade of the 20s and how prosperity allowed for collective security to be the dominant trend amongst nations, right? The trade and the prosperity made it so that war was very unlikely. But that all came crashing to an end in the 1930s as countries did act in their own self interest again. A lot of you left comments about the idea of protectionism and how that was America's fault that happened. And I wanted to get into it anyway, so I might as well respond to some of those comments. So, America in the early 1920s kind of start that protectionist mentality with the Fordney McCumber Tariff. All right. At that time, after World War I, America wants to go back to its isolationist policies, championed with the return to normalcy, right? Warren G. Harding's campaign slogan. And with that, the Fordney McCumber Tariff is signed. The Fordney McCumber Tariff wanted to protect American domestic goods because they knew that after the war, imports would rise back up again now that the European countries were out of the war. So they signed it into law in the early 1920s, and it immediately started to take effect, and those protectionist policies were felt by other countries. Now, I know I said the decade of the 20s was prosperous with collective security, but we start to see that situation deteriorate, led by that idea of American tariffs and American protectionism. Kind of one of the biggest examples we can look at the Fordney McCumber Tariff is definitely the agricultural industry, but sugar in general, where we see an over dollar per pound tariff on sugar goods. So Latin America is going to be really negatively affected by that tariff, that protectionist policy. So they are going to match the United States tariffs and try to hurt the United States, just like the United States hurt their biggest import into the country. You see another in the late 1920s, you see France meet the United States with a protectionist policy of their own, where they more than double the tax on cars, which, spoiler alert, is going to be a really big deal in terms of causing the Great Depression and the stock market crash overall. So we see very early signs in the 1920s of American protectionism, their isolationist mentality with return to normalcy, start to show the cracks in that collective security and how self-interest is going to rear its ugly head yet again. Hope that helped. See you soon.